All right, welcome back to another episode of the Living the Life Show. I'm your host, Columbus Cody, and I have a wonderful show today. I'm looking forward to spending time with our special guests. Today, let me help me welcome Dr. Jeffery D. Skinner. I think the D stands for determined. Is that correct? Determined?
Determined,
Devoted.
Douglas,
So it's not devoted, it's Douglas. I was close. I was
yeah,
close. Well, I'm so grateful to have you on the show. I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to dive into today's topic. But before
appreciate the
we,
opportunity.
of course, before we do that, though, I always like to get a chance to know my special guest a little bit
Sure,
more. So I would give a few rapid fire questions, and so
sure.
you don't have time to think. You just got to share what's.
All right,
All right, are you ready? Question number
I'm
one. I only
ready.
have about four questions. Number
All
one,
right,
favorite condiment for a hot dog or hamburger?
catch up.
Ketchup. All right, so we got a traditional man. Traditional. All right. Now, do you put mustard on them as well, or are you?
I do. Yeah, that's
Okay. All
about
right.
the only thing I put mustard on is a hot dog.
Okay. Well, to me, a hamburger and a hot dog is not finished without mustard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
I like a little bit of I like the bitter taste on a hot dog, and add a little bit of the pickle relish on there, so that kind of finishes it off.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with those. All right. Which hymn seems to always usher you into God's presence? Like, if there's one song that gets sung, and you're like, that's the one.
Yeah. It is well with my soul. And
It
great is thy faithfulness. Kind of a tie between the two.
uh it's so funny whenever I give questions like I have my guests are like, oh my God, do I have to pick just one? Yep, just one. So great is thy faithfulness, and it is well with my soul. All right.
Yeah.
So at the
Yeah.
end of the show, you got to sing both of them. I forgot to tell you
All right.
that. No,
What's
I'm
that
just-
all we got to sing? That's okay. I was a music major in college. So
you can make it happen. All right. All right. Here's one I'm really looking forward to hearing you answer. All right. You get to have lunch and pick the brain of one person in the Bible. Who are you having lunch with?
well, Jesus is the obvious answer, right?
Right. Right.
I think besides Jesus, it would be Paul.
Okay.
And he's someone who had that encounter with the living God, so to speak, and
Hmm.
just walked away completely changed. I mean, as you heard from the Chosen series, I was one way, and before I met this guy, and now I'm another.
Paul. Something told me you was gonna pick Paul. Something told me. All right. Um, in one word, how would people describe you in one word?
Passionate.
Passionate. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, let's really flip it. In one word, how would God describe you?
Faithful.
Oh man, that's two good ones. Two good ones. Passionate and faithful. It's
Yeah.
my prayer that people would see me in those same. That definitely God would see me as faithful, but that people would also see the passion that is within my heart. Now, tell me, why did you say passionate though? Because that came super easy. You didn't have to think about it.
Yeah, I mean that's just. If there's one adjective that has been used to describe in my entire life, it has been passionate. Passionate. I don't do something unless I'm passionate about it. And
Mm,
you spend minutes with me, and I'm passionate about my family. I'm passionate about my Lord, and I'm passionate about planting and discipleship.
mm,
And that's just and that's just me. I mean,
yeah.
I'm a hyper guy. I've been a hyper kid. When I was little, I was the kid who in first grade the teacher had to put him in timeout because I wouldn't stay in my seat. Yeah.
Hold on. They had timeout way back then.
Well,
Man, back
technically
then.
they didn't have timeout back then.
Right.
They had a paddle,
Right, right. Yeah, that's what I was
as
thinking.
vice
Because
principal, and the vice principal had about 12 paddles on his wall, and you got to choose which one you
oh
wanted.
my goodness, straight torture, huh? And they still couldn't break the passion out of you. That's what I'm
They
talking about.
couldn't. They couldn't.
Mm.
It made me more passionate. It's like, how dare you?
I had a teacher in second grade. Her name was Miss Payne, and they didn't. She didn't have a paddle. She had this like almost, it looked like a piece of car tire. It was like a strap, and she called it Black Susie. And I think she had spanked so many kids throughout the years, because I think she probably taught for like 40, 50 years. She had spanked so many kids throughout the years that Black Susie was like basically tattered. Like, it was, by the time she got to me and she had to discipline me in front of the class, Black Susie didn't hurt anymore. And I'll never forget, she spanked me in front of the class and I didn't cry. And she stormed out of the room and I was like, oh my God, I just beat Miss Payne, right? She comes right back in with a brand new Black Susie. I was
Oh
like,
my
oh
goodness.
my goodness. She was not going to let me win.
Yeah. Yeah, but to this day, I still prefer the paddle over the switch, right?
Mm,
My
mm.
grandmother had these mimosa bushes or trees, whatever you call them, out in front of her house, and she'd go out there, and I knew when I had gotten on her last nerve, and she walked out that front door and picked up a mimosa switch, I was in trouble,
Well,
and there was nothing that hurt worse than that.
at least she went and picked it out. She didn't make you go pick your own
That's
switch, you
right.
know?
That's right. They did well. If I picked out, yeah, occasionally she did, but if I picked out a small one, she'd go back and pick a
Oh,
bigger
yeah.
one.
Yeah. Now, you don't want to make grandma go out and get her own, because then that's when it's going to be double hard. Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's
All right.
exactly right.
All right. Final question. What's the best book you've ever read besides the Bible? All right. I
Yeah.
love to learn different books that people read, because I like to go back and read some of those as well. So, what's the best book you've ever read besides the Bible?
Oh shucks, I'm trying to remember the name of it now. It's about change and shaping change. Um, it's by Chip. Um, just a second here. I'll tell you what it's called. Always because the name of it is not what you would expect it to be, and that's why I
Mm.
always forget the name of it. Let me check my library here.
Wow. Got the library. That's what I'm talking about.
On my phone, it's I mean,
You
I
keep.
got a library here too, but it's those books. When you start moving from place to place, those things get heavy,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
that gets expensive when it comes to moving. But let me check here. One moment here.
Is it
I want
Chip
to call it
Heath?
shift or something like that, but I don't.
Switch by Chip Heath.
Switch. There you go. That was it. Switch. There
All
you
right.
go. Good
Switch
job,
by
man.
Cheat. How to change things when change is hard.
There you go. That's exactly it. Yeah,
All
and
right.
it's just a good book. And if you're going to be a leader, inevitably you've got to know how to lead change and lead it well. And early in my career, I was a bull in a china shop. I just go in and my philosophy was, hey, just tear it down and start, and let's change it all. And
Mm,
so that was a really good book because it talks about shaping the path. It uses the metaphor of the rider and the elephant.
mm-hmm.
And so, if you ever go to India or somewhere like that, you see these guys, or even in a circus, you see little bitty guys on top of an elephant, and supposedly they're driving an elephant, they're guiding an elephant where it needs to go. And what the authors or what they say is essentially they're not guiding the elephant. I mean, if that elephant wanted to, it's how much bigger than that
Right.
rider.
Right.
It can go where it wants to go. So
Mm,
there is no forcing the elephant to go where it wants to go. You got to shape the path and make
mm,
it willingly go there and help it to think it's his idea or her
right.
idea if it's a female elephant. And
Cool.
so anyway, they taught me a lot about shaping change and shaping people. And I think it's good whether you're raising children or whether you're leading a church or leading an
Mm,
organization. Unless you're building it from the ground up, and even then, there's going to be times where you have to shape lead change.
yeah. Yeah. That's what they say. One thing is inevitable is change.
Change. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. That's an old BB and CC Winans song, I think, too. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, speaking of books, let's talk a little bit about your book. All right. You got a new book coming out. All right. Tell me a
Yeah,
little
I
bit
do.
about Reachable. Tell me a little
It's
bit
called
about
Reachable.
this. Yeah.
Uh, so it's Reachable: 7 Keys to Loving, Mentoring, and leading the church of the next generations. So I spent 15 years planting churches, actually a little bit longer than that, and now I coach people on how to start churches and plant new churches. And my dissertation research, when I got my when I did my research for my doctorate, was examining and trying to learn what created a salient Christian identity in millennials and Gen Z. And what a salient Christian identity is a meaningful Christian identity, is one that affects the way you live. So we have a lot of folks. We tend to operate. We're very blessed in the United States. We can worship and do as we please when it comes to our God. So if we want to worship Allah, we can do that. If we want to worship Jehovah God, we can do that. Or if we don't want to worship any God, we can do that. Um, but Christianity has had a huge impact on the United States of America. And so when you think when you talk with people, especially in the Bible Belt, they were generally identify as Christian. Now the younger generation, what we're discovering in the younger generation is that they will frequently say they don't really identify with any of them. So they don't
Mm.
identify as Christian, or they don't identify as Muslim, or frequently they check a box called none. So when Barna
Hmm.
or some of these other research companies will send out a survey, they'll ask them, what faith you identify as, and they'll give them different choices. And one of the boxes will be nones, and they will check nones. And so it became a really big talking point probably 15 years ago, that the rise of the nuns, so to speak, NONES, not nuns. It's in the
The
Vatican
Catholic
type
Church.
nuns, and we're not worried about the nuns leading a rebellion or anything like that. But and so that really began to be a big talking point within our churches, within the Christian faith, and a concern that the youth were not, attending church, that they were beginning to fall away from the faith.
Mm.
And so when you talk about a meaningful Christian identity or a meaningful faith, you want them to not just check the box that they're Christian, because we had a lot of people that were the older generations that would check that box as Christian, but the reality is their life did not reflect that of a Christian. They didn't really reflect Christian values. It didn't. They may not even attend church on Sunday morning. Now, I'll
Hmm.
make the caveat that going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than standing inside a garage makes me a car.
Hmm.
But the likelihood of me having an understanding of that car, if I spend lots of times around cars and lots of time in a garage, I'll have a lot more knowledge of that car, and I'll have a lot more knowledge of what it takes to make that car work. And so the church is that place where we learn more about Jesus. The church is a place where we learn more about what it takes to live a life of faith, and to be faithful to God, and to have a life that's not just one on survival, but
Hmm.
one where we thrive. And so what we discovered was, or what I discovered in my research was, yeah, they were identifying as none, but it wasn't that they were atheist or even agnostic. It was that they were confused more than anything. You might even say they're lost.
Mm.
And so we say lost is then not that they're we could say they're going to hell. That's what you used to say old times, and you can, that creates lots of controversy and things like that. And certainly, I feel like that if I did not have um, a life, a relationship with the Lord that was meaningful, and that would be the place that I would end up,
Right.
whatever that looks like there. But more often than not, that creates a barrier when we're talking to someone who is not a believer
Mm.
or identifies as a nun. We don't want to walk up to them and say, "Hey, if you don't change your life, you're going to hell." That doesn't motivate my children. It doesn't motivate my. If I just told them, "Hey, if you don't do this, you're going to go to hell." So what I prefer to do, and this goes back to shaping change, is painting a picture and telling a story of a life that is better than the one that they're living now.
Mm.
And so rather than threatening them or trying to scare them, let's give them something positive to look forward to and strive for.
Hmm.
And so everybody wants to live a good life. The world's way is tell them that if they'll be rich and famous, that they'll have a good life. Um, and the reality is I know lots of rich and famous people that don't have a good life. They die of
Right.
drug overdoses. Michael Jackson died alone on his couch.
Mm-hmm.
Prince died in an elevator. I know Howard Hughes died in a hotel, top of a hotel, alone in his room. Some die of suicide. So there's lots of wealthy people out there that don't have a good life.
Mm.
Um, and so what I learned through my research is that nuns were a way of them identifying that they just don't know yet. They're kind of pre-believers.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we begin to teach them and answer questions for them and engage them in real relationships, we discover that they are very much open to the Christian faith and having a Christian identity, but don't want them to just be Christian in name only. We don't want them to just check a box of I'm Christian. We want want it to affect their lives and how they live. We want them to have a life worth living, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so my research focused on three questions. What is it that makes one have a Christian identity, salient Christian identity in adulthood, meaningful Christian identity in adulthood? And so I asked three questions. One, what did methods have to do with that? Was there a particular evangelistic method that helped to create that Christian identity in adulthood? Was it another method that did it? Maybe it was a conservative church or a liberal church or a philosophy book or teaching them to read or something like that. Teaching them to read the Bible. Was it reading the Bible that created that identity? So I asked that method there. The
Mm-hmm.
second question is what role does experiences play in a meaningful Christian identity? I use the word salient in my research. It just means meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, the third question was so we had experiences, we had methods, and then the third question were relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, what role do relationships play in in adolescence for someone to have a meaningful Christian identity as an adult? And of the three questions, the relationship was the key.
Mm.
And so, yes, experiences were significant. And let me define that term significant for us here. In research, we use that word all the time in real life. I like to distinguish between real life and the academy because they don't always match. In theory, lots of things work, but when you get to real life, they don't always work.
Mm-hmm.
And so in research, they say if something, when you do all your statistical analysis, if there is um, a, a 95% occurrence, then that means that it's significant. And then there's levels of significance. So there's somewhat significant, which would be 95%. So 95% of the time, if someone has a meaningful relationship in adolescence with someone who has who is a Christian and has a meaningful relationship with Jesus, the chances are when they become an adult, they're going to have a meaningful Christian relation. They will have a meaningful relationship with Jesus as well. They'll have a
Mm.
meaningful Christian identity that affects the way they live. And again, that's what we mean by meaningful is it affects the way they live.
Mm-hmm.
Ethically, morally. And there are differences between ethics and morals. Um, and so uh, not just 95% of the time though, but it was like 98% of the time. So
Wow.
there's only a 2% chance that was accidental. And
Mm.
so for something to be significant in research, it has to have at least a 95% occurrence in order for that to happen. It might have been 87% when they had a positive experience with Christianity. It might have been 87%, but that's not considered significant.
Yeah.
When they had a particular method. Maybe you tell them to just read through the Bible and do like a Lee Strobel, and present, the case for Christ and go through and do all the research and things like that. Maybe 70% of the time that resulted in a meaningful relationship with Jesus in adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't happen 95 or 98 or 99% of the time. Therefore, it was not considered significant. The only thing that had a, um, a highly significant impact on whether or not someone had a meaningful Christian identity in adulthood was that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so this book was born out of that research. And
Mm-hmm.
I just want to give people hope and for the next generations and to let them know, look, there's a huge opportunity out there. We have an opportunity for a new great awakening, a second great awakening, and one here within the United States. I don't know if you heard about it this last year, but there was a huge revival that broke out at Asbury University up in Kentucky.
Yeah, I saw that.
And these were young people. It was led by young people. It was people that were now that's a Christian university, so people think, well, not a big deal that the revival broke out. My son attends a Christian university in Nashville, Tennessee, Trevecca Nazarene University. Wonderful college. Both my wife and I graduated from there. But I can tell you that the number of Christian students or students that have a meaningful Christian identity on that campus is not 95%.
Right.
Not everybody would identify as, surprisingly, you find some Muslim that attend a Christian university up there
Mm-hmm.
because people they want a good education for their kids and things like that. So, in other words, just because they're on in a Christian university doesn't mean that they're Christians. Is my
Right.
point there.
Yeah.
Asbury had a huge revival. It lasted, I think, 3 months or so before they finally had to shut it down. You had people come from all over the world, literally coming from all over the world to see what was happening there at Asbury University. And so that's just one example
Mm-hmm.
to say that, yeah, this generation is reachable. The next generations are there, but it's going to start with a relationship. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to start with preaching. It's not going to start necessarily by even inviting them to church. I'm not saying we don't invite them to church, but it doesn't start there. The chances of my neighbor coming to church increase significantly, over 95% chance that if I have a good relationship with my neighbor and I invite them to my church, the likelihood of them coming is higher, much
Mm-hmm.
higher.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's to say that when we're wanting to reach the next generation, instead of sitting in our churches and talking about them and how we've lost hope for them, let's get out there and begin to share some space with them. Let's go where they are. Let's talk to them. Let's build some relationships with them.
Yeah.
And I don't mean market to them. There's a difference between marketing. This generation is the most marketed to generation in the
Mm-hmm.
history of the world. I mean, you pick up your phone, there's an ad there. Um, I forget the statistics for how many ads we receive, we are exposed to each day, but it's astronomical amount.
It
Uh,
is.
and I mean everywhere. And so this generation is savvy. They understand. You go up
Mm-hmm.
to a Gen Z or a millennial or younger even. I mean, you talk to a 13-year-old today, and Gen Y, and they're going to be savvy kids, and they're going to know if you're just targeting them. They don't want to be
Right.
a target. They don't want you to just build a relationship with them so that next week you can invite them to church. I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about intentional relationships where you're sharing space, you're sharing experiences, and you're just hanging out.
Yeah.
And then it's not a matter of you even necessarily having to give your testimony. You live your testimony. They see when you're in traffic down in Atlanta or Nashville, and the guy cuts you off. They see how you
Right.
respond. Bless you,
Right. Right.
instead of the most likely
Right.
response, right? They see when you're having a bad day. They
Mm-hmm.
see when you're diagnosed with cancer. or I had a friend of mine, his daughter was 35 years old. I tell this story within a book. We watched her grow up. This was the first church where I served. I was serving as a minister of music there,
Mm.
and just a fantastic family. And this couple had moved right before we got there, and people kept telling us, "Oh, if you had," and we're just going to call him Joe for now, because I don't have permission to share his name on the podcast here,
Mm-hmm.
although he'd probably give it to me. But anyway, they'd say if you just missed Joe. Joe used to be here. Joe and Susie were just fantastic people. Well, about 3 months after we were there, they moved back. And so we got to know Joe and Susie and their family. They had two little girls. And at the time, one was 5 and one was 3. And just amazing kids. And then they grew up. And then my wife and I, my wife is a teacher. And so we began working with the youth a little bit. And they became teenagers. And then we were asked to run an impact team. And so an impact team is immediate personal action for Christ today. It's a group of kids that go around to churches and malls and things like that, and they sing and do musicals and performances and things like that. So we were asked to lead that for Alabama South District Church of the Nazarene down in Alabama. And so they tried out and they became a part of that. Gifted young ladies.
Mm-hmm.
The For my final in my master's, I had to do a final project for spiritual formation, and so we took about 35 kids up to the mountains and did like a 4-day weekend with them. These kids were a part of that, and it's just an amazing experience with them, and they all went and became involved in ministry in some way. The vast majority of the kids that was on that impact team and on that trip, and surrender life to Jesus. Well, they were already had a life of with Jesus, but rededicated or recommitted, kind of doubled down on that effort there. And a lot of them ended up in ministry or still in ministry today, and that was true of this young lady. And she was a gifted poet. She was a gifted singer and a gifted writer, and gifted in so many areas. And we found out about 3 years ago that she had a rare form of tongue cancer.
Mm.
And the doctors were just baffled. They're like, this is the girl was 32 years old, 31 years old at the time. And, they're like, this doesn't make any sense to us that this is beginning of COVID even. And, said this is stuff that we see in 89-year-old men who have smoked and drank and had, dip snuff, chewed tobacco. I mean, just this is the type of cancer we see in them. We don't
Mm.
see it in 30-year-old women who have never smoked or drank or anything in their lives, and write poetry and build crafts and everything else. And so they're just dumbfounded. So they decided on a treatment plan and went in and they tried aggressive chemotherapy. They tried radiation, and even had to take her tongue.
Mm.
So they had to give her an artificial tongue. So for someone who sings, that was a devastating thing.
Yeah.
I watched that young lady, endure all of that. I watched her family endure her. I watched as their response. And unfortunately, a little over a year ago, she succumbed to the cancer. Even though they took all that out, she just went at the end of that treatment time. They went back and they said there's nothing they could do,
Mm.
and sent her home. And about 3 days later, she passed away. And I watched their response. I watched her response and her family's response, and I continue to watch their response to that loss. And rather than abandon God and say, why'd you do this, God? Why me? You know, there's those questions come. I'm not saying that she didn't ask that question, but just to trust that even though things didn't go the way that they had hoped they would go, that they still believe. In fact, they've taken that belief and now they work with a nonprofit, Never Thirst, who digs wells for and provides clean water for communities across the world that don't have access to clean water.
Mm-hmm.
And so that family has now taken, that was a favorite charity of this young lady. And so Joe and Susie have now taken that banner, that mantle upon themselves, and they do fundraisers. They had a fundraiser just this last August, July, I think it was, in Valley, Alabama, and raised several $1,000s for Never Thirst. So they've taken that loss and they still use it to lift up the name of the Lord and do good things in the name of the Lord there.
Yeah.
When the young people see our reaction to that type of stuff, I'm not saying we don't give our testimony. Sure, I talk about Jesus all the time when you're around me.
Mm-hmm.
But if my life doesn't match my testimony, it really doesn't mean a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so these kids and these young people, when we're building relationships with them and we're sharing space with them, when they see that, that's when they say, I want what he's got. I remember the movie When Harry Met Sally, when she's in a restaurant there and she goes all out for the pie, you know, and the old lady looks over and says, I want what she's got. And so it's the same thing with us. And that's what this book is about, is it's just, first, rather than trying to lead them first, love them first. Rather than trying to mentor them first, love them first. And so I just walked through just 7 keys, and there's a lot more than it's just, this is not it's much more than a how-to book. It's a how-to book, but when you get right down to it, the how-to is a relationship, and the relationships are messy. And I'm not saying that you've got to be perfect as a Christian. There was one perfect person that walked the planet, and we crucified him. So I'm not saying that we've got to be perfect. They understand that, but they want us to be authentic. And they want us to be willing to answer the hard questions. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people? We've got to be willing to engage them in those conversations. And sometimes we can say, I don't know. Sometimes we can say, we just have to trust that we can trust the next chapter because we know the author. Sometimes that's the answer that we have to give.
Yeah.
But our response is what they watch. If we withdraw and we leave because something bad happens to us, or a child that we've raised, from day one, we've raised them in the church, but for whatever reason they become a prodigal and leave. Our response to that says a lot more than what our words will say. I think it was I may get it's attributed. I remember that it was attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, but it says, preach the gospel at all times, use words if necessary. And that's kind of what I'm talking about in this book here, Reachable, is preach the gospel at all times, and if possible, if need to, if necessary, use words. And so, it'll be out February, late February, early March. It should be out. It's with the publisher now. It's being published by Trinity Publishing. It's been a labor of love. It's a very easy read, even though it was born out of a dissertation research. I was very intentional about putting it in layman's terms, so that these were very very approachable. It's not an academic work, in other words, and they
That's
are
my kind of book.
yeah, and it's a I've got stories in there. The story that I just told of the young lady who suffered with cancer, she's in there. I talk about a church where another young lady came in her very first day at church. It just happened to be baptism Sunday.
Mm.
And this church invited her to be baptized. And she's like, wait, what? And I can be a part of this family now. And really that's the center, that is the core of where this generation is when we're talking about being lost, is they don't feel like they belong anywhere.
Mm.
And they want to belong. My daughter is 16 years old. She's making her college decisions now. We get something from a college every day in the
Mhm.
mail. She's bombarded with emails. Hey, and the tagline from almost every one of these colleges, the tagline or somewhere within there is going to be "You belong."
Mhm.
And so these, if the colleges are saying this to these young people, what does the church need to be saying? And too often, what we say is you don't belong until you change your life.
Mm.
And what I'm saying in this book is we've got to be willing to and look, their faith is going to look different than our faith. I've had different experiences, and our experiences shape who we are. You know, if you grow up in the rural South, which I did, it's one type of experience. If I grow up in New York, if somebody grows up in New York City,
Mhm.
it's going to be a different experience. And so their approach to faith is going to look a little bit different. These young people, you know, their music is not, my son's music is not my music. When we get in the car, I'm not listening to
You say, "I am the DJ in this car."
that. I like it. Fortunately, he likes 80s music, so we can agree
All
on
right.
80s music. So we find common ground. But look,
You've
there's an
raised him
example too
well.
of building a relationship. Find common ground. You don't have to say it's my way or the highway.
Mm.
You can say, okay, I don't like this music, or and you don't like this music. So where's a common thread? What's something
Mm.
in common we like?
Yeah.
If you don't like chocolate ice cream, but I do, but you like strawberry ice cream, well, let's find somewhere that sells both. You know, it's about finding compromise. In a
Right.
world that's divided as we are today, that wants to focus on the differences that exist here. Let's not don't let's The church doesn't need to do that.
Mm.
Too often the church wants to join in that conversation there and say, no, you got to do it like this. And
Mm.
what I'm saying in this book is that the church has got to be willing to allow people in that disagree, and give room and space for them to live their faith
Mm.
in the way that they feel is faithful for them, and in trust that God, who created the heavens and the earth, has the ability to work, and the Holy Spirit has the ability to work within their lives to lead them in relationship and shape their faith in His relationship with them in ways that He deems faithful.
Mhm.
I think that's where we need to be.
Yeah.
And instead of focusing on what's different about them, let's focus on that they're a human being, and that God and Jesus died for them. God sent His Son for them and died on a cross. Let's focus there, that
Mm.
we all have humanity in common. And even if their political ideology is a little bit different than ours, even if they're um, hey, I address this in the book, the LGBTQ, community there. Um, Look, I'm not saying the church is going to ordain those people as pastors. That's a completely different conversation there.
Mm.
But our reaction to when a same-sex attraction or a bisexual walks into our church, our reaction to them is going to say a lot. And if we create barriers to them, how if we refuse to have relationships with them, can't we trust that the God of the universe can change people and can lead them in a relationship with them?
Right.
When I was planting a church in Auburn, Alabama, I had a family that came in. They didn't bathe. um, and I mean, you've seen the Peanuts cartoon with Lionel or whoever it is, Pigpen,
Linus.
that has
Yeah, you're right.
the
Pigpen.
yeah, it has the blanket. I mean,
The
when he
cloud that
walks,
follows him.
he's
Yeah.
just got this
Hmm.
dust, behind him there, and that was kind of this family, the entire family, and they had animals in their home, and so you can imagine they if they were too tired to let the animal outside do its business, it just did it in its house. And
Mm.
um, I had a lady come up to me after they'd been coming for a while and said, Pastor, I can't come to church if they're here. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. But my Lord won't allow me to not let them come to church.
Hmm.
I can, after I build a relationship with them, we can have these conversations, and I did. But the moment you walk in, I didn't send Nancy Nazarene, who'd been part of the church for the last 25 years
Hmm.
or 75 years, to walk over there and say, until you bathe, you can't come to our church. Until you
Hmm.
learn to bathe, you can't come to our church. Uh, I was growing up, rural church, and I tell this story too. Wonderful church, amazing church. We've had lots of people called to ministry out of that church in rural Alabama. I grew up, and I had a friend, and I was constantly inviting him and his family to come to church. Um, his dad was the manager of the Alabama Beverage Control store in the mall, ABC, and it was where they sold liquor and all that type of stuff. Church of the Nazarene, we are teetotal. We are completely abstinent when it comes to alcohol. We don't believe that you should drink alcohol. It's a social issue for us. We don't say you're going to hell or that it's a sin necessarily to drink. We just say that we like to, because alcohol has caused such harm to families, that we, in solidarity with those families, abstain from the use of alcohol. And so you can't join the We're not supposed to be able to join the denomination, all these types of things. If you, this was back when I was growing up. If you drank,
Hmm.
and so this man walked into our church with his family, and a lot of people knew it because it was in the mall, and they saw him standing in there, and he had a unique look about him that was very recognizable. And when he walked in, he had a lady from the church tell him that they weren't welcome there because he worked at a liquor store. And they never came back.
Hmm.
So I'll give two examples there. One of the young lady who came and they invited her to be baptized on that same Sunday and trusted that the Lord would help her to understand, and that future classes would help her to understand what was happening in the midst of that baptism, while they gave her a thumbnail understanding in the moment, but didn't create a barrier for her. And then juxtapose that with with the church I grew up in, where the family came in, and they said, "Up, because you work at a liquor store, you're not able to be here." I had another experience in my church growing up, where a lady walked in. She wore pants. At the time, you're not supposed to wear pants in the church. The preacher stood up and preached a sermon on why you're going to go to hell if you wore pants in church. Yeah. No, that's a bad example, and that's what I'm saying. And so choose whatever position it is today.
Hmm.
And I'm saying we can't do that as Christians.
Yeah.
We've got to be, let's put our ideologies aside, and let's just say, I want to love you. And it's not my job to clean you up. I can disciple you, and absolutely I advocate discipleship within the book. In fact, that's what the book is about. It's a combination, a 1-2 punch: evangelism and discipleship.
Hmm.
And as a church planter, that's what I've done for the last 15 years, and
Yeah.
continue to do when I coach people. Is it begins with evangelism. Church planting is the number one most effective form of evangelism, because you don't have a congregation. So if I'm going to pastor, unless I'm going to stand on the sidewalk and scream at people through a megaphone, I gotta I gotta have a congregation. And so that
Mm-hmm.
begins by getting into the community and getting to know people and building relationships with them.
Yeah.
And then you invite them into the church. And look, you do church outside the walls as well. When you're planting a church, sometimes you have church in the park. One of the most successful events that I ever participated in was in Columbus, Georgia. And Columbus, Georgia is a unique city in that it borders Phoenix City, Alabama. If you know anything about Phoenix City, Alabama, way back in the day, I say way back in the day, in the 50s and 60s, that was they called that little mafia. I mean, that was
Mm-hmm.
a you know, crime ridden area there, and um, and so there was a bridge that connected Phoenix City and Columbus, and they shut it down, and it became a pedestrian bridge because it was just too unsafe for people to cross. And so we worked with some churches in the area there. And it's got a pretty significant homeless population as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we joined forces with some of the churches in the area there, as well as with the city government of Columbus, Georgia, and Phoenix City, Alabama. Talked to the mayors of both cities and said, "Hey, we want to come together, and we want to offer not in a single church's name, but just do this in the name of Jesus. We want to offer a Sunday that's a banquet on the bridge." And so we spent a year planning that entire thing. We had a church that was bigger, that had a nice kitchen that could cook the food and stuff. We had different, it was like a giant potluck, really, is what it was,
Mm-hmm.
where we just all brought it into the community there. We wrote sidewalk signs, just drew sidewalk art and stuff, advertising it a couple of weeks ahead. We had thousands of people that showed up at
Wow.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of conversations that we had with people that were not part of a church, and we didn't spend that day to invite. We said, yeah, we're part of a church. If you won't come to our church, that's fine. But it was really about just letting them know about Jesus. And I forget the number. I mean, we had a huge number of people that accepted Jesus that day.
Mm-hmm.
We had people that we didn't just hand out tracts and that had $100 bill on the front, and when you turn it over on the back, it said 3 steps to be a Christian. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't do that type of stuff. We just had authentic conversations with people that that told them and shared our lives with them, and then fed them. And one of the things you learn is that when you're sharing a meal with someone, when you're breaking bread with someone, they need something to do, and talking is a good thing. And they're a little bit more open. Their defenses come down a little bit because they're
Mm-hmm.
enjoying this food so much and they're
Yeah.
happy. They get all those endorphins flowing in there, right? So it's an easier time to have these conversations there. One of the most successful events that I've ever participated in my life, and it wasn't centered around the church. It
Mm-hmm.
was just centered around Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where we got to be in society today. House churches are hugely popular now. And the likelihood, here's an interesting thing. This generation, this younger generation, they are much more likely to attend a mission trip before they are attend your church.
Oh
Um,
wow.
they want hands-on faith.
Mm-hmm.
They watched my generation and our generation talk about Jesus. This generation wants to experience Jesus.
Mm.
And so that's another thing that I bring out in the book there is that if you it begins with a relationship, and then out of that relationship is going to grow love.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you just see them as human, and then you know what is God but love? I mean, God says that. And so when God is describing Himself, besides to Moses, it is through love. And what greater act than to give your life for people that you don't even know?
Mm-hmm.
And people that are crucifying you out of anger and betrayal, and from the cross to say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Um, no greater love than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
God's
It,
not necessarily asking us to die for them. He's just asking us to build a relationship with them.
mm-hmm.
And so that's really the crux of the book. There, I just take the years of experience in pastoring and planting churches and coaching, and just kind of in my research and kind of bring it all together
Mm-hmm.
in that book. And I'm really proud of it. It's where I plan on creating a discipleship. It's actually written as a discipleship study. So there's
Mm-hmm.
at the end of each chapter has questions, and it's meant for you to take back and with a group of friends and begin to have these conversations and discussions amongst yourselves,
Yeah.
and they're designed to engage your thinking, critical thinking skills, a lost art today. You know that as a teacher, critical thinking is a lost art,
Yeah.
and and so it's designed to help you think critically about your faith, about your own faith journey, and then imagine new ways that you can create new relationships and share space with the next generations in order to earn permission to mentor them
Mm-hmm.
and lead them.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, without that relationship, this generation is not going to listen, and they don't care what you say. John Maxwell said it a long time ago: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely. You know, my wife shared a video with me not long ago. It was a Satanist. This lady was speaking to a Satanist, and she just let him talk. You know, she didn't butt in. She didn't try
Yeah,
to correct him. She didn't try to hit him with some scripture to counteract what he was saying. And when he finished, she just hugged him,
yeah, I saw
embraced
that.
him, and he said it was like he felt something in that moment, and the only thing he could figure it was Jesus. Like he could
Yeah,
feel it, and so his life changed. And
yeah,
when you were speaking, it made me think about that, in
yeah.
that we feel like we have to straighten you out. We have
Right.
to hit you in the head with a few verses that'll shake loose whatever you don't
Mm.
understand. And the funny thing is, I might have these scriptures at hand, but I don't live them. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? And the Lord is like, come on now, don't try to act like you got it all together just because you know a few verses. You know, embrace, like you said, embrace the people,
Yeah,
love the people, because that's what made people chase after Jesus. It was
it
his
is.
love. That's what makes us wake up every Sunday and go to a
Right.
building, to surrounded by people that we love, that we feel love Jesus. You
Yeah,
know, and if that's that, I think that is the key, as you stated, is that relationship. You know,
yeah.
relationship is vital. And I'm looking forward to reading your book. I truly am.
Yeah, and there's on the other side of it. I think sometimes the church gets a little bit afraid that we're going to get contaminated
Hmm.
by the sin, so to speak. And if you watch the life of Jesus, I mean, there was lots of dirty things in Jesus' time, right? You had the blood was, I mean, forbidden by the law. You don't touch blood at
Hmm.
all. And so if you had blood anywhere near you, you were outcast. Shepherds were unclean. They were dirty. They're out in the fields with sheep. They stunk like sheep. They were outcast. Lots of outcasts in Jesus' time there. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Had to climb a tree just to see Jesus there because he couldn't see over the crowd, but it also served as a hiding place for him. The You had the leper. They had no cure for leprosy then. So
Hmm.
if it touched you, it's highly contagious. They had to stay out. They announce themselves unclean, unclean, so people would give way, then come in. The model that Jesus shared with us was that as Christians, we don't have to worry about being contaminated with the filth of sin, of uncleanness. Because when Jesus touched the unclean became clean,
Mm.
not we didn't become dirty. And so we got to trust the transformative power of Jesus that when we
Hmm.
encounter these people, don't compromise your faith. Don't compromise your morals. Don't compromise your theology. Nobody's telling you to do that. We're just telling you to love people. And I
Right.
think the church hears love and they think, oh, there's another person telling us that we gotta compromise who we
Hmm.
are. I'm not telling you to do that at all. I'm
Yeah.
telling you the opposite. You stand firm in who you are and you live your life in faithful ways in the way God has called you to do it for you.
Hmm.
Don't compromise that.
Yeah.
They will absolutely respect that, but that doesn't mean you can't love them in the
Right.
process.
And if I'm hearing you, what I hear when you say that is that I don't compromise, but I don't condemn.
Right.
That's the issue.
That's right.
I'm not going to lower my standard of living to make you feel comfortable, but I'm not looking to make you feel uncomfortable. I'm not looking
Exactly.
to force you to be like me tomorrow, because
Right.
even a lot of what I'm showing you isn't really me. It's what I've learned to put on this facade. I've learned to
That's right.
play church. And you know, my pastor and I was talking about this last Sunday, and I said, I'm a firm believer that if a person continues to come to church, even if they're just playing, one day
Yeah.
God is he's gonna show them himself so vividly that they have to make a choice
Yeah.
that it's like, I either choose you, Jesus, or I'm just
Hmm.
gonna flat out say, nope,
Yeah.
you can't keep playing. And
Yeah.
so the key, and you know, it's so funny. We have not even touched the questions about church planting.
Yeah.
But it's such a beautiful thing because, like I said, I'm listening to your description of your book, Reachable, and I'm like, you know what? This is exactly what, as the church, what we need is to understand. We say we want to see other people saved, but yet what does that really look like? What does that
Right.
mean? You know, and the only way they're going to seek after the God we seek after is if they
Yeah.
do feel that love. You know, that's what's going to make them chase after God. Not that you can quote all these scriptures and you can make them sound so pretty and flowery. No, the fact that you know who I am,
Right.
and yet you still have not thrown me away. You
Yeah.
continue to tell me and guide me and show me to the God that can clean me up. You're not trying to clean me up. You're just showing me
Yeah.
to the God that can clean me up. And I think that takes that, like you said, that takes trust in God as well, that that he will do what he's done in our lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, why do I feel that God can't do something in this person's life when he did it in mine? And as Paul would say, you know, leaning on your buddy, he was the chief sinner of all sinners.
Yeah.
I am the chief. And they're like, nah,
Yeah.
Paul, you ain't no chief. No, I was chief sinner.
Yeah.
I was good at what I did. I did
Hmm.
wrong and I was
Yeah.
good at it. And
Yeah.
now I have a better understanding because of my continued walk with Christ. Now I can continue to shed more and more and more and more. You know, there's this photo, and I wish I could show it to you, but it's a sculpture where the man is sculpting himself, like he's chiseling off himself. And when I saw that, I saved that image immediately. And what God placed in my spirit was that every day you have the opportunity to chip a little bit more away at who you are to become what you're supposed to be, you know.
Right.
And the cool thing is we don't even have to do all the chiseling, you know.
Yeah. That's right.
We can let him do
Yeah.
the chiseling. He just shows us what to chisel away. He shows
Yeah.
us what needs to stay and what needs to go.
Yeah.
And we just have to trust him to make that happen, you know.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And yeah, you said you condemn, you compromise, but don't condemn, and
Yeah.
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And look, there's sometimes it may make the other person. I mean, the reality is the relationship is going to be messy at times, and
Mhm.
sometimes because of their own guilt. That's one of one of the things I will tell you is that there will come a time in that relationship as they grow closer to the Lord. There is no more miserable person on this planet than one who is running from the Lord.
Mm.
And so I watched it in my own home with my dad. I did not grow up in a Christian home, but I saw that switch in him when the Lord began to deal with him and began to call him into relationship with him. He was one of the most miserable people I know, and couldn't
Mm.
even think straight. Just was confused all the time, and we didn't know what was going on with the man. And then a year later, he goes to the altar and asks Jesus in his life, and he says, "That's what's going on. The Lord's been talking to me." I mean, this my grandfather was a pastor, and I remember my dad saying growing up, I will never ever go to church,
Mm.
arguing with my granddaddy about church, and even threatening to beat him up,
Hmm.
and Dad had a really bad temper, and just we I remember praying, saying the blessing at table one time,
Hmm.
and him saying, "I get so tired of hearing the name of Jesus in this house.
Mm.
I don't want you praying at my table again." But that's him miserable. That's that relationship there. I didn't compromise. Look, okay, I don't pray at the table, at least not out loud.
Right.
But I
Right.
still pray.
Right.
You can't stop somebody from doing that. Look at China. They forbid you from being a Christian in China, and there's more Christians per capita in China than anywhere else in the world. So
Mm.
you're not going to squash the Christian faith there. But my point is, there may be times that they get uncomfortable and may even accuse you of condemning, but you ain't said a word. So it's not to say that the relationship is all going to be sugar and spice and everything
Hmm.
nice. There, a relationship, period, whether it's in Christ or look, my kids still get into trouble. We're a Christian home. There's still hard conversations that are to be had,
Hmm.
but you don't lead with condemning. They're going to accept that when they know that you love them. You can have those hard conversations,
Yeah.
but you frame it not in condemning, but you frame it in love.
Right.
Because I love you, I don't want to see you hurt. Because I love you, I want to see you thrive.
Hmm.
And going out and partying every night is not thriving. Sleeping around is not thriving.
Hmm.
Um, doing the things that we do, being angry at the world is not thriving. That's when but it begins with that relationship there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like you said, you not compromising, you don't condemn, but you do have conversations.
Hmm. I told my oldest son is 14, and I told him not long ago. I said, I just want you to trust that your dad has your best interest at heart.
Yeah,
Trust me on this. I said, I
absolutely.
promise you, I will only say no when no is the best answer.
Yeah,
Like trust in my guidance because I only want what's best for you.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I don't want you to be a clone of me, but I only want what's best for you. So
yeah,
if just trust the process. I know it's not what you want, and I get it because when I was your age, I wouldn't have understood this either. But just trust you know your dad by now.
yeah,
You know dad. Come on.
yeah.
Trust your dad on this one.
Good,
You know,
good.
and you're 14. Dad doesn't know what he's talking about. But
Yeah,
when you turn 21, you're like, oh, okay. Hopefully by the time you're 21, dad really
right.
did know what he was talking about.
Yeah,
And, my prayer has always been that I want my sons to come to know the Lord at an early age, not to come to know how to do church, but to come to know
mhm,
the Lord. And that comes from one, having a relationship with them, like you said, but two, they see the truth in my life. I'm not I'm not one way at church and then one way different at home. What they see
right.
at church is what they see at home. And that's so important. We can't live a double lifestyle.
Yeah,
And I mean and of course I haven't had a chance to read the book yet because it doesn't come out to February,
right.
but I assume that a lot of what's in my heart is what you are trying to educate us throughout the book.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'm really looking forward to reading it. And is it going to be audio as well?
I plan on doing audio. It'll be a little bit after audio, and actually, I'm going to create a small group video series that
Hmm.
people can watch and participate in as well to kind of be a companion to the book as well. So I hope to be able to get that out through Right Now Media and some other places like that. But yeah, so I have an audio book. I have the Kindle version. I have the hardback, softback, or paperback, and the video series there.
Mm.
And the TBN will publish the book. The audio book will be out through Audible.
Okay.
Um, and so I have to get. But that's a process to create. And it's usually by the time when you're publishing, this, you've published a book, you
Hmm.
send it to the publisher, and then it has to go through the editing process. And so, about the time that you got the final version of the book that you can be able to record, then it's being released, and that's why the audio book tends to fall 6 or 8 weeks behind because it
Yeah.
takes a little bit of time to produce that.
Yeah.
But definitely, probably, I would say by May, the audio book should be out.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, I'm gonna put both of them in my collection. I think I'm
Yeah,
gonna start doing what you did. I thought that was a cool strategy to get it on Kindle and audio and then track it. And that way, like you said, now I'm taking notes. I'm grabbing quotes for whenever I'm teaching someone else about it. I got all these lined up.
hmm
That's a like I said, I literally listen to learn from everyone.
yeah,
I always ask my guests because your questions may be different. You got the question about the condiment. Not everybody gets that. Somebody may have gotten what's your favorite cereal, but
right,
I always ask what's your favorite book, right, or the best book because I like to learn from other
yeah,
people. So
yeah,
now I got to go check out the book you mentioned today, and
yeah.
then because for the sake of time, I know you got to run to take care of your chaplain duties. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna come back together. We're
Okay,
gonna we're gonna title today's podcast Reachable. All right.
okay,
And then we will come back together at a later date to do another episode together where we will actually discuss church planting.
yeah, yeah. That'd be
Because
good.
I do want to, number one, I want to learn about it, right?
hmm
And I do want those who are listening in and watching to understand what does it mean to plant a church and how does
Yeah,
that look, and because there might be people that have a desire to do that
right.
and or feel they have that calling on their life
Yeah,
and don't
and that's the
know
key is
don't
a
know the
call.
steps. Yeah,
Yeah,
don't know the steps. So I don't want to jump into it because I'll mess around and ask some of my
yeah. That's fine.
prolific
Yeah.
questions. But
I'm sorry I took you in a different direction
no,
there.
no, no,
Well,
it's totally fine because again, like I said, to me, that today's the greatest title we can call it is reachable.
mutual. Yeah,
The world is reachable, but
yeah,
are we willing to reach?
yeah.
Right?
That's it.
Are we
That's it.
willing to reach out? And because someone reached out to us, Jesus reached out to us through someone,
Right.
right? It wasn't like we walked down the street and Jesus came down from heaven, and no, he
That's right.
came to us through someone else.
Yeah,
And so now we are called to be that someone else for someone else. I
yeah.
like that.
That's right.
We're called to
That's
be
right.
that someone
Yeah.
else for someone else.
Yeah, and I tell that story in the book too, is how I came to know Jesus, and I won't tell the whole story because, like you said, we don't have time. But it began with a Snoopy bus, so there's a teaser for you, uh,
Snoopy
for
bus. I
uh,
like that.
for people to read the book and find out how Snoopy and Charlie Brown played a
Mm.
role in the conversion of a 5-year-old kid. So
Oh, I love it. I love it.
anyway,
Now, before we sign out, though, for today, I always like to ask my guests this question to end the show.
hmm
Um, the name of my show is Living the Life, right? The Living the Life Show podcast. I always like to know who's that one person that lived so much like Christ before you
hmm
that it encouraged you to give your heart to Jesus, because we like to
yeah.
give them a shout out. We like to honor them.
Yeah, it was my grandfather. It was my mom's mom. He was a old country preacher. His church, maybe 20 people in there. Uh, old. I mean, when he first started pastoring that church, they didn't even have indoor plumbing.
Mm,
They had a outhouse, and but I watched him. He worked at a paper mill. He had a third grade education.
mm,
His dad, he was one of 21 kids, and his dad would wake him up early in the morning. The reason he'd get to go to school is because his dad forced him to work in the fields
mm-hmm,
to earn money when he was supposed to be in school. Back
mm,
then, they didn't require you. It wasn't a law to go to school,
right.
and so I watched him despite all that, and despite the fact that he had a third grade education, he's one of the wisest men I ever knew in my life. And so, without fail, it was him. Frank Spencer was his name. He passed
Frank
away
Spencer.
a few years back, and I talk about him in the book. He had 5 gardens that he'd work all day, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, do his prayers, devotion stuff, go work at the paper mill, get in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then work in the garden and do his studies at night. I'd hear him in there in the living room praying. If
Mm.
there was a man that could pray and he'd raise the roof, he would do it. You would think that when he was praying, you would think that that God was a billion miles away, because he prayed loud enough that he could hear him if he was a billion miles away.
Oh, that is beautiful. Tell me his name one more time.
Frank Spencer.
Frank Spencer. So we honor you, Frank Spencer, as you're hanging out in heaven now.
There you go.
Join you again soon. But we acknowledge those people because, again, it's my prayer that one day someone asks that question and our names come up.
Yeah,
right?
that would be good.
The reason I am the way I am today is because of Dr. Jeffrey D. Skinner. The reason I am the way I am today because this guy named Columbus Cody lived like Jesus before me.
That legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I do appreciate your time today. And again, like I said, we're going to connect again because I do want to share that wonderful, I want to share the expertise that God has given you with those who will join us down the road.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, anytime, reach out, let's do it again. And I have plenty to say about church planting as well. And that's not to say that, discipleship is a key part of church planting, but there is a process and a proper way to plant a church, a healthy church. And so we can talk about that next time.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, guys, there you have it. There you have it. I had an opportunity to sit down with a great mind. I pray that you go out and grab that book. I think it's going to bless you. I know it's going to bless you. I'm looking forward to it. So start looking out in February. One more time, Dr. Skinner, tell us where we can find that book.
Yeah, www.reachableBook.com. We'll go there. Or you can go to, you can be at Amazon. You can search on Amazon. It's not available on Amazon yet, but you can search on Amazon. Anywhere books are found, you can buy it there. Also, my website, missionalleadershipcoaching.com. You'll be able to find it there as well.
There you have it. All right, so let's get ready to make sure we put that one in our library, but not just put it in your library, right? You got to put it in your heart. Let's make sure that we are reaching out to the world because the world is reachable.
Yeah,
all right.
Thank you.
Watch it, share it, and live it. God bless you guys.